Welcome back. This week we are talking with Chris Phelps. So George, tell us a little bit about Chris Phelps and how you got to know him and how you brought him on the show.
Well, Chris and I actually started talking to him pretty early on in dental school. I just had a lot of questions for him. He's one of those people that I annoyed as a curious dental student. And Chris, in the course of the last few years, has started a lot of different businesses. So it's kind of hard to, describe him in one way.
Sure.
He has his dental practices in North Carolina, and then he has this, the call center. I don't know if that's how he would like me to describe it, but, that's how I would think of it.
Sure.
And then, but really what I think makes him unique is his training with Robert Cialdini. And Robert Cialdini, for those of you who don't know, is the author of Influence, the Science of Persuasion. And he thinks there's like these 6 core principles that explain human behavior. And so Chris took the opportunity to go I think he's in Phoenix actually, to fly out here and do a lot of training with him. And he's like one of a very select few number of certified individuals that understand his practices very well, and he applies them to dentistry. So that's in essence what Chris is all about.
Have you read the Cialdini book?
Yes.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I thought it was a good book. I think it's I think with a book like that, it helps to have the explanations of the principles.
Sure.
Sometimes you read a book and you're like, you're really explaining a very simple concept. But I think his book, it does a good job of explaining a concept that I think needs explaining. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Well, and I feel like sometimes in dentistry we want like dental specific professionals, like we want people with dental perspectives, and so sometimes if you take just a book like that and you're like, okay, these are good principles, but how do I directly bring that in to my practice and how I talk with patients and how I interact with my staff? And so it's awesome when you've got someone like Chris Phelps who can kind of step in and show you how that applies in dentistry. And let's see, I want our audience, I want you to pay attention to how much George actually gets to talk in this episode. So sometimes when you have a really awesome guest on the show, they tend to kind of take over and like T-Bone did to me. So you got T-Boned in this episode.
Yeah, and for everyone's, just so everyone knows, I was not sleeping. I was there. I just wasn't talking.
There has been 1 or 2 episodes of this podcast where I was falling asleep between guests who were talking to me. I won't share which ones they were, but I think I did a really good job of hiding it. So I don't know. Maybe you just hit it really well and you actually were sleeping in between. No, I don't think you would be with Chris.
No, definitely was not sleeping. It just wasn't talking.
Just wasn't talking. Okay, cool. Well, here is a lot of Dr. Chris Phelps.
I'm very excited. I have with me today Dr. Christopher Phelps. Dr. Phelps practices in North Carolina, and he's been an avid poster on Dental Town, and he's very, very well known on the science of influence and persuasion. I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. Phelps introduce himself to us, and we'll go ahead and get started. I think we're in for a great episode today.
Hey, hello everyone. Chris Phelps here. Thanks for joining us. Introduce myself. Where do I start? I've been practicing now for 14 years. It's hard to believe. Time's passing so fast. Originally from North Carolina, UNC Chapel Hill for undergrad, down at dental school at Nova Southeastern University, which was kind of cool because it was kind of the first new dental school to open in 25 years. So I was the 3rd full class that started there. So I had some unique opportunities. And then decided to come back to Charlotte, North Carolina, which been calling home ever since. Started out as a single practice, joined my wife's dentist, who'd been her dentist since she was 14, and kind of grew us from 1 location to 4 locations over a 6-year period, 6.5-year period, 10 times the revenue of the business, and then decided to change up my life and subtract to multiply, if you will. And instead of growing for growth's sake, focusing on maximizing the capacity of the ones I felt had better opportunities. So with the goal of trying to free up my time, effort, and energy, but still be productive and profitable. So sold 2 of my highest producing least debt practices, took over my 2 highest debt least producing practices, one of which was costing me $35,000 to $40,000 a month in expenses, which is not a fun check to write every month. And set aside implementing some of my the science of influence and persuasion. That was right around the time when I first heard Dr. Robert Cialdini speak on his 6 principles, and they really spoke to me, being in some of the core root problems behind my practice. And it was also the time that I developed my call Tracker ROI system, which is a marketing tracking system I developed out of my own needs because I had no idea what was going on with my marketing, what was going on with those telephone calls. Were the ads that I were paying good money for bringing enough quality and quantity of new patients who were spending enough to justify the expense? Or was it my team not answering the telephone and not converting into appointments? Or was it both? Trying to get to the why of those things. Sold, let's see, out of those two practices, they're doing about 1.6 million when I took them over. Flash forward 3 years later, and the two practices were doing 6 million in total. So a lot of growth in a small amount of time. Out of that growth kind of bred a book I wrote called How to Grow Your Dental Membership Plan, taking this idea of a membership savings plan and figuring out who is it really for, specifically what market is it really for, these active independent living retirees who aren't really coming to the dentist right now because they feel like they don't have insurance, they can't come to see us unless it hurts or they're in pain. And getting them over that mindset to come in and check us out and watching what can happen when you do those things and how you can grow your business. And I've since, sold one of those two practices. I'm down to my original practice and have a plan to take it from 3 million a year to 6 million. So that's
And
kind of
when
what I've
did
been
you
doing.
kind of create that plan on taking that single office to 6 million?
Well, it was after I sold the third practice, and I was focused on maximizing the capacity of this one. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could do 6 million in one office when I used to do 6.5 million in four offices? So in my head, it was kind of like a challenge of, wouldn't it be cool if I could get the same production with one office that I used to get with four, but now with me as the sole owner instead of having partners? And so I, like most things, I started with the end in mind. I thought, well, what is it going to take to get to 6 million? And what does that really mean for the practice with 8 chairs and reverse engineer it? So it's 6 million. If I have the practice open 6 days a week, if it's open 12 hours a day, 50 weeks a year, I've got 8 chairs. I need to collect $200 per chair per hour to make that happen.
Oh, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, and then the problem when you start breaking it up into little bits like that doesn't seem so insurmountable, does it? Right? And I started looking at, well, what am I collecting per chair now? Because I really didn't know, and I think we were collecting like $375 per hour per chair right now, and that's with some holes in the chairs, right? So not every chair is full 100%. So I felt like 200 per chair in collections per hour was an attainable goal. I felt like it was reachable with the right knowledge of expanding the hours, having enough dentists and hygienists and team to support it, and then having enough marketing know-how to get a better quality patient in the door so I can keep feeding the practice patients for whatever hours that we're open. So if you can satisfy those two things, you can hit any goal that you attain for yourself that way.
I really like the way you looked at that and kind of decided how you were going to do it. And in itty bitty pieces, it's not as insurmountable, like you said. I want to kind of start from the beginning because a lot of what you do is based on Robert Cialdini.
Yep.
So can you kind of take our listeners through who he is, how you kind of got connected with him, and then your training with him?
Yeah, definitely. Dr. Robert Cialdini, he he wrote the book Influence: The Science and Practice, and you may have seen him on the New York Times bestseller list here recently. His newest book came out called Persuasion. So instead of persuasion, persuasion. It's another fantastic book and some great foundational materials. He's kind of considered the godfather of behind the science of influence and ethical persuasion. Many world leaders look to him and have consulted with him on matters of state and for their country, which is kind of cool. I first heard him speak, like I said, after I sold my two best ones and took over the two worst ones. And it just really spoke to me because, again, going back to, until you get to the root cause behind a problem, the why behind the problem, if you will, studies show that your brain can't really focus on solving the problem. You can't really work on fixing it. So you distract yourself from the problem. You ignore the problem or you procrastinate from it as a result instead of really tackling it like you should.
And what was that problem that you noticed that made you kind of go to influence?
Well, for me, it was, the two practices. Here we are. Even though one was a cold start practice, it wasn't producing, and I felt like it should be producing better. And, I had an associate in that office, and I kept hearing from him, well, it's the economy, it's the patients, it's the staff, right? Trying to pass the buck on to everybody, but where the source of the problem was. And so I felt like if we could do things differently, if we could use some of these principles in the practice, we could change the outcome of the practice. And lo and behold, I kind of, freed that associate up to be happy elsewhere and took over the practice myself and started using these principles that I had learned after hearing Dr. Cialdini speak and started seeing some immediate results. So the practice went from collecting 35, 40,000 a month to collecting 120,000 a month in a very short amount of time. And it wasn't a lot of big major changes. It was just small, subtle little things that can make a big difference. And so what Dr. Cialdini did, and what I always applaud him for, was he was great at recognizing patterns. And so early in his days as a researcher and psychologist, he went to out to all these different businesses out there and joined every sales training that would hire him. And he was just kind of studying all their processes and their sales training, looking for patterns and seeing what stands out. What is something that is universally used by all these people, whether they had a name for it or not. And what he found was that 6 key things kept popping out, regardless if he was getting door-to-door sales training or working in a high-end ad agency in New York or LA, or if he was talking to cult church leaders. He still saw these 6 key things that kept standing out to him. And that's what he decided to do his research on, and what the first book he wrote, Influence, the Science and Practice, is about. And he discovered those 6 things, which are, reciprocity. And if you think about them, when you hear them, they're so powerful because they're in universals. It doesn't matter what continent you were raised on, who your parents were, what your religion is, etc. They still have an influence over you, no matter where you are in the world, which is another thing that drew me to it. These things that are kind of based in science, they're not my opinion, right? It's not my opinion on how to get better case acceptance or how to get better referrals. Because these things were based in science, I knew they'd been tested. And if they had been tested, that told me they had been proven. So if it worked for them in those settings, if I put it in a similar setting, even though it was my dental practice, I should see similar results. Okay.
And then what are those 6 principles?
Yeah. And it told me it was reproducible. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. And the principles are reciprocity, as I mentioned, which is if someone gives you a gift of value, you instinctively feel the need to give back. If somebody does a favor for you, you feel the need at some point to do a favor for them. Okay, if they ask. My oldest son had his 3rd birthday party, and that was the first party he had with like kids, that weren't family members. My wife asked me to bring the cake to the car, and I brought the balloons and stuff to the car, and she asked me to go back and get one other thing, and it was this little basket of presents. And I was like, what are these little presents? And she goes, oh, well, that's the gifts for the kids coming to the party. I said, what? What do you mean gifts coming to the? So these kids are coming to our party and giving our kid a gift, and we're giving them a gift in return? She goes, yeah. I said, why are we doing that? She goes, I don't know, because that's what you do. and we've all been there, right? Someone gives you a present, we give them a thank you note, okay? It's ingrained in our society. If people give you gifts, we feel the need to give back in some way, shape, or form. That's what reciprocity is. The liking principle is a fairly
And so
simple
back to reciprocity before we move on. Sorry, Chris. How would you apply that in your practice then? How would you use that principle in the office?
Well, I mean, golly, there's all kinds of ways. First off is realizing that, when we think of gifts, we think of intangible or tangible gifts, like a physical thing you put in somebody's hand, like a present or a gift certificate or something.
Okay.
Well, gifts can also be intangible things, whether you realize it or not. And so many times we've already given our patients gifts. We just didn't recognize that it was received as a gift and that they really appreciated it. And so the example I'll give is if you've ever gone in to see a patient after hours or on the weekends and taken care of their dental need, okay, you have given them a gift. And many times they are very appreciative and will thank you for your time and for making the effort to come in. The problem we find is that many of us, especially if you're like me, if you were raised in the South, you were raised to downplay compliments and praise, right? It's like a cultural thing. And so, it's kind of hard for me to recognize those praises sometimes. So when somebody would do that to me, what I would say was, oh, yeah, no big deal, no worries, not a problem at all, right? Try to downplay it. But in fact, what I'm doing is doing the patient a disservice because I'm not making them feel special. And it's also not ethical because it's not true. It was a big deal. I did come after hours. I left my family to be there, right? So instead of downplaying it, if I just acknowledged the gift I gave them of my time and service, et cetera, and just said, hey, my pleasure, and then leverage that moment to ask for something, many times you're likely to get a yes for your request. So if they would have thanked me for coming in and I would have said, my pleasure, oh, and I see we need to get you scheduled for your next cleaning, and let's get you scheduled back to take care of this tooth more permanently. what works best for you this week or next week. Like I could immediately gone in and asked to schedule them for two things: their cleaning, right, and their appointment. I could ask for a review, right, a Google testimonial. Anytime you got a patient in the chair and they're sitting up and they say anything positive about their visit, like, "Oh wow, that didn't hurt at all today," or "Man, I can't believe we're done. That's it." Those are gifts you've given them that mean something to them, whether you realize it or not.
And
Those
then
are
you're
perfect moments of power that Cialdini says that those are perfect times to turn around and ask for something in that moment and just say, "Hey, well, I'm glad you had a great experience. Hey, would you mind doing a Google review for us? Pull out your phone. Let me show you how to do it." And many times, again, we're likely to get a yes as a result.
That makes a lot of sense. Sorry to cut you off there. So we're going to principle 2 now.
Yeah. So the second principle is the liking principle, which is pretty simple, right? We like to do business with people we like. Sounds pretty straightforward. And so at the same time, though, we like to do business with those who are like us, who have similarities or common interests with us. And we like people who like us and tell us, meaning we really like people who praise us, right, and give us compliments. And so one of the ways we use this in our practice to show patients that we like them is that we use a service from a company called Banyan, in that we ask them to take pictures with us, right? And so we have these cute little signs, and that'll say, yeah, my dentist rocks and best experience ever, 5-star experience, all these kind of cute little signs that you can custom make with the patient. May the floss be with you, and whatnot. And we take pictures with them. And then we post that on our social media, but we send that to the patient and as a text, as a gift from us, and say, "Hey, here's the picture we took at the office as our little gift from you. We appreciate you coming in." And so you should see people's faces light up when you ask them to take a picture with them. And they're like, "Wait, you want to take a picture with me?" "Yeah, of course we do." "Oh, wow. Okay, great." Okay, those are great little things that build relationships with people. And
And
if
how many times do you guys do that a day?
Oh, 5, 6 times a day at minimum.
Wow.
And again, it depends on if patients are having a great experience or it's been a long time patient or someone we feel comfortable talking to or, that we can joke around with. We ask them and we always get a yes and they always love it. And in fact, it's a great way. We then text them the picture as our gift, going back to reciprocity. And then guess what we ask them in the text? "Oh, and by the way, here's a link. Would you, if you don't mind sharing this on your social media pages about our practice, or you can also leave us a Google review as well and click this link to do it." So again, we're asking them after we've given them something, which is also kind of cool. So you can leverage that liking in two different ways and add some reciprocity to it as well.
Perfect. I like how you brought that back together.
Yeah, and then so the third one is consensus or social proof. This is probably one of the most powerful influencers in the terms of online medium right now, for online advertising to influence people your way. But consensus of social proof means the evidence of what others are doing many times will influence us to do the same, right? Anytime the majority is doing a certain behavior, if we find out we are not in the majority, many times just knowing that alone is enough to move people your direction, okay, and get them to fall in line and do what the majority are doing. And if you think of this from a human nature standpoint, it makes sense, right? Think of like a school of fish or like a herd of cattle out in nature. What happens when you stand out from the herd, right?
Yeah,
You tend
absolutely.
to get eaten. Bad things happen. And so it's human nature that to not stand out from the crowd necessarily. We all want to blend for that reason. So one of the things we talk about in my influence and persuasion workshops for dentistry is how do we use this in the practice with consensus? How do we use it in marketing? But one of the ways I love to use it is, wouldn't you like to get more patients to pay their bill today? I mean, so you don't have to send them a bill. Well, one of the things we have sitting at our front desk is, if you find out the majority of your patients pay their bill at the time of service, then share that with everyone, right? And that alone is going to influence the minority to start doing the same. So I started tracking my counter collections. We kind of estimate what the insurance pays us as an out of network provider. We file that as a courtesy to the patient and we'll wait on the insurance check, but we collect the balance that day. That's kind of our goal, right?
Okay.
So I know what I should collect per patient per day. So I know what our total collection should be based on our estimates. And at the end of the day, you add it up and say, well, here's what we should have collected. Here's what we did collect. Here's our counter collections percentage. Well, what I found was that the majority of our patients, it was around 70%, 69, 70%, something like that, did pay their bill in full at the time of service. That's a majority. So all I did was put up a sign at check-in and a sign at check-out that says, hey, 70% of our patients choose to pay us at the time of service. We appreciate you doing the same. All we're doing is just sharing the consensus information is that the majority of the people pay their bill. So we would love it if you would do the same.
I mentioned in a previous episode that one of our biggest issues right now as young dentists and dental students is our student loan debt. It is one of the main reasons why we strive at Shared Practices to navigate the path to successful practice ownership. We aim to help our audience by doing everything we can to help you earn a great income as a dentist. It has always been my advice to tackle your student loan debt by refinancing your loans after becoming a practice owner with a stable income. Doing this allows you to avoid paying too much on your monthly interest. The key to refinancing your loans is selecting an experienced lender that will offer you a competitive interest rate. Did you know that most student loans charge the same rate regardless of how creditworthy you are? So chances are, as dentists, you're probably paying too much in monthly interest. Laurel Road, a division of Darien, Roe & Bank, is a national leader in student lending. Laurel Road has helped medical professionals across the country refinance their federal and private dental school debt, saving thousands on interest over the life of their loans. Not only do they offer great terms and great service, ADA members receive an additional 0.25% rate discount on top of their new and already low rate for as long as they remain an ADA member. Fill out a 2-minute application and get pre-approved rates instantly if you are eligible. It's free to apply and there's no obligation to accept. For more information specific to your needs as a dentist and to submit an application, simply visit www.laurelroad.com/sharedpractices. Again, that is LAURELROAD.com/sharedpractices. Laurel Road is an equal housing and opportunity lender. All rates are subject to eligibility. Savings may vary. This is a paid promotion of student loan refinancing by Laurel Road. And did you notice a spike in the amount of people that paid in advance?
Big spike. So then over the next couple of weeks, as we were tracking it, 70% turned into 74%, turned into 79%, turned into 84%, turned into 90%. And now it's been 96% forever. Okay. So now the sign says 96% of our patients choose to pay their bill at the time of service. We appreciate you doing the same. So now I'm getting more of my money up front. We influence almost a third of those people who weren't doing what they were supposed to move our direction. Maybe more, almost 2/3 of those people.
That's huge.
To start their bill on time. And guess what? I didn't have to say one thing. The information of what the others were doing said it all for me without me having to say a word. So now instead of people trying to sneak out of the office, they're waiting there at checkout and they're pulling out their wallet instead because the sign says everybody pays, so I guess I got to pay.
Wow.
Fairly simple, right? Straightforward, but extremely powerful. So find out your numbers. If the majority of your patients are doing that, share it with them and watch the others fall in line, or at least the majority. Authority. Authority is the fourth principle, right? Many times we look to credible experts to tell us what we should do. I joke with people, there's only one thing I know how to fix, and that's teeth. Otherwise, I got a guy for that, And I realized that when I was at a party in college at Chapel Hill, and I was in the bathroom, and I could hear the toilet running. And we've all heard a toilet run at some point in our life, right?
Yeah.
And the valve inside the toilet's got a leak in it, or the seal's not closed, and so the water's running back in and making that noise. So I had seen my dad, who was a pretty handy guy growing up, fix anything. I saw him fix our toilet several times. And for whatever reason, I got this wild hair. Maybe it was because I had a few too many beers, but I thought, hey, I can fix this. I got this. So, I pull off the top and I'm looking inside, and sure enough, I see a little rubber thing's got a leak in it. So there's a balloon floating inside the water, inside the tank, right? And you pick up the balloon and the water stops, so you can fix the issue. So I pick up the balloon and I'm just staring at it inside the tank, trying to figure out exactly, is it the chain that's off? Is it the rubber seal? What exactly is it? And lo and behold, I didn't realize this, but there's these two little valves at the very bottom of every toilet, okay? One on each side. And I never knew what those things were, but apparently they're little rubber gaskets. So at the same time, both gaskets on both sides shoot out and water just starts flooding the floor. I mean, I had like 6 inches of water in like 30 seconds, it seemed like, you know?
Oh man.
And I'm like, I'm still holding the balloon like, oh crap, what do I do? And so, I finally found the water shutoff valve and I shut off the water. And I was like, geez, I'm throwing towels down. And I grabbed my friend Lee, who was at the party with me, who is a guy that can fix anything. He was like, oh, yeah, I don't know what happened, but we got to get out of here. So we're walking out the party, and I'm like, hey, Ryan, thanks for having us. Oh, by the way, I think your toilet's busted. And so I knew in that moment that I am not an expert at plumbing, and nor will I ever have enough time to learn how to be a true expert or authority in plumbing. So if a plumber comes to my house and tells me I need a brand new toilet, I have to rely on their expertise and credibility and their trustworthiness, right? And I'm going to assume, well, I guess I need a new toilet. Okay. So that's what authority is, right? We look to people or credible experts sometimes to tell us what we should do.
And how do you enhance your credibility in the office with your patients?
Yeah, well, think about this. Name one dental product out there that doesn't have a dentist's face on it and a name to it.
Yeah, I can't think of one.
Right? Why do they do that? Because they're building off that authority principle. People look to these people to tell them what they should do. And so if so-and-so says buy this product, it's many times that alone is enough to do it. In the practice, the key for us is it's not from there's some inherent authority built in with our title. There's these cues, or we call them trappings of authority. Shortcuts people look to give them evidence that you're successful, that you're an expert, that you have credibility, all these little things, because they make decisions with the most minor of information and kind of blow your mind. So one of the cues and trappings of authority is not only our name and doctor title, but believe it or not, it's actually what we wear. Okay, so I often ask dentists, how many of you wear a white coat when you deal with patients? Because I find the dental field's kind of split half and half. Half of them kind of wear just scrubs, and the other half kind of wear the white coat, but then they wear like a shirt and a tie, and they are like dressed formal, right, to the T. And there's those that are like me who would probably just wear a pair of shorts and a T-shirt if I could get by with it. And so I ask people, based on the science of it, which has more authority, right? What is the issue? And what the science tells us is that, believe it or not, it's the white coat is what's the key. The white coat is the trigger of authority for most people. So those people who wear a white coat are going to have better case acceptance than those who don't, just statistically proven. Okay.
Wow.
The amazing thing is that it only counts when you first meet someone.
Only the first impression?
First impression. That's really the key for these little triggers of authority. After that, you don't ever have to wear the white coat again. So I tell people it's not the shirt and tie. You can literally wear anything you want under the white coat. I mean, you probably don't want to be naked under there, but you got to wear something. But, okay, the white coat is what's the key, okay? And then as soon as you're done talking to that patient, guess what? Take it off, and you never have to wear it in front of them again. It's already established your credibility and some of your authority, and they're already looking at you as an expert over if you walked in without the white coat.
So then, Chris, in your office, do you have the white coat on when you first interact with the patient, and then like on your recall visits, you don't wear it?
Well, I am just more comfortable and used to wearing it all the time. So I wear it all the time. But, one of my dentists, she's a female dentist, she only wears it when she meets people for the first time. And then she takes it off and she's got her scrubs on underneath. So it's really a personal choice. Totally up to you. But under my white coat, I'm wearing like a T-shirt, or I'm wearing like a little polo shirt or something I'm comfortable in. Definitely not a shirt and tie.
Interesting. Wow. And then that's the principle of authority then.
That's authority. The next principle is kind of an interesting one, and to me is probably the root cause for the majority of the issues in our practice. And it's called the consistency principle. And so what consistency is, I want you to think of commitments. So if you can get someone to make a true commitment, okay, to take a stand on an issue, whatever, there's a lot of external and internal pressure on them to stay consistent and follow through and do with what they said they were going to do. And this is true when you think of the opposite term, like inconsistent. What are some of the words we use to describe people who are inconsistent, who don't do what they say they're going to do? Can you think of any good ones?
Yeah, I would say irresponsible.
Right, like flakes and wishy-wappies, flip-floppers, and liars. Okay, those are the things we call people who don't do what they said they were going to do. There's a whole list of negative terms associated with that, but not one positive one. So there's a lot of pressure on us if we make these commitments, right, to follow through and do with what we said we were going to do. The problem I found in dentistry is we don't really get true commitments out of people. Not really. Not if you really understand the science behind it. And that's why, because we didn't get a commitment out of them, no wonder they don't show up for their appointment.
So you're saying that when we're booking the appointment or when we are doing the case presentation, we're not getting a true commitment from the patient?
That's it. We're not getting a true commitment out of them to do what they said they were going to do, which is to schedule their appointment, to show up for their appointment, to pay their bill on time, to refer someone, whatever it is we just asked them to do.
So then how do you go and get that commitment?
Well, there's a couple ways. For instance, when you're talking about like how do you get people to show up for their appointments, for instance? Well, when you're confirming appointments on the telephone, they did a study up in Chicago with this restaurant. And you know that the restaurant industry has the worst no-show rate of any industry? There's something to the effect of 40 to almost 50% of the people who make a reservation across, average across every restaurant across the country, 40 to 50% of the people don't show up for their reservation.
I did not realize that.
Right? So talk about a horrible no-show rate. Imagine if 40% of your people didn't show up today who were supposed to. Right? It's hard to make a business that way. I think that's a big reason why a lot of restaurants fail within 2 years, starting out. And so what they were trying to do was trying to get more of a commitment out of people to show up for their reservation. So instead of doing the standard confirmation line, hey, by the way, please call us if you need to change your reservation. We're looking forward to seeing you this day and time. They changed their wording to, hey, Mrs. Jones, we see you have an appointment on this day and time. Will you please call us if you can't make it, if you need to cancel or reschedule? And they waited for the person to say, yeah, okay, I'll do that for you. And what they did was by asking them, will you do this for me, and waiting for the patient to respond, they got an active commitment out of them. It verbally came out of their mouth. Okay, so they've already making more of a step just by doing that to showing up. And by changing nothing else in their processes, but changing their language to, will you please call us, and waiting for the person to say yes, that alone dropped the no-show rates in this restaurant from 40% to 10%.
Wow.
So significant change in behavior when you get real commitments out of people. And there's, of course, a bunch of different levels to that. And God, I could talk about commitments forever. But, and so we use these things to make, set the stage for people to show up for their appointments.
So then like a hygiene appointment, 6 months in advance, if you ask somebody, will you call us if you need to reschedule? And they say yes, are you banking on them calling you 6 months from now when they need to reschedule?
Yeah, and the key is, one of the factors that kind of boost the principle is you have to remind them of the commitment, especially if a significant amount of time has passed. If it's been a couple of weeks, I'm not as much worried about it. But if it's been 6 months, you got to remind them. So one of the things I show in my workshop is I've got a postcard, right, that has we make them fill out their own day and time of their appointment. They got to put their name and their address is on the postcard as well. So when they get it in the mail, I wanted them to look at it and go, in their handwriting, go, oh, crap, I guess I did say I'd be there. I guess I should show up. Right?
Oh, that is so smart.
But at the same time, I actually put that question on my postcard, and I make them answer the question. So it says, if you cannot make this day and time, will you please call us if you need to cancel or reschedule it? And I make them put yes or no next to it.
Oh, man.
Right? And everybody puts yes. But it reminds them 6 months from now, oh, crap, okay, I did. If they had this idea when they get the postcard and say, well, I can't really make that time, I wanted them to think, oh, crap, I did tell them I'd call them and at least let them know. Because my thing is, I don't care if people have to cancel. I don't try to make that a barrier and try to talk them into keeping their appointment. I mean, life happens. If people can't show up, that's fine. I at least want them to call me and let me know, right? The worst thing they can do is just no-show on me, okay? Because at least if they call me, my team has some systems in place. Well, we can fix that, right? I can fill that hole with somebody and then have some time later to put a new patient in down the road as a result. But at least call me and let me know, okay? And that's really what it was designed to do. Remind them of the commitment they made so they do show up, and if they can't, at least they call me and let me know. So that's kind of a little bit on the consistency principle. And then last but not least is the scarcity principle. Probably the most the one that's been used unethically the most against us, especially from a marketing standpoint, is scarcity. And basically, when resources are limited, when things are dwindling, suddenly we want it more, and we'll pay more to get it, even if we didn't want it before.
Okay.
People people care more about what they stand to lose, loss, than what they stand to gain. But from a case acceptance standpoint, what are we really taught in our case presentations in school and whatnot? Aren't we taught to sell the benefits of their treatment?
As opposed to what could potentially go wrong if they don't treat it.
Yeah, guess which has more influence? The consequences of what's going to happen if they don't move forward with the treatment we're about to recommend. And so, one of the things I like to say is if people really knew what we knew was going to happen to them, meaning if they knew it was going to cost them more time, effort, energy, money, pain down the road, most people would prefer to not let that happen and would rather do something about it today to prevent that. So why are we hiding from that fact when that's actually what we should start with in our case presentation process? So it's one of the little pieces of how I put all the principles in order and what steps you should go through to set the stage to increase your case acceptance for every procedure in dentistry. And so ethically, if there's a situation where there are going to be some consequences if they don't move forward with it, well, let's talk about that first, then go into how we can avoid those things and the benefits of the treatment we're going to recommend.
Okay, so then you would start with the cons of not treating.
Exactly. So the idea is if somebody needs a crown, right? Meaning they've got enough decay, the tooth's been damaged to the point that they need a full coverage crown. Well, what I like to do is picture that tooth in your mind and play it out in your head. What's going to happen if they don't do anything in a year, 5 years, 10 years? I don't care. And think to yourself, is it going to get better or is it going to get worse? Well, of course it's going to get worse, right? The decay doesn't stop. It's just going to keep on going. And then what's going to happen? Well, it's probably going to get to the nerve. It's probably going to you need a root canal, right? It's going to get infected. So I'll let people know if they need a crown, I'll show them their x-ray. I'll say something to the effect like this. Hey, Mrs. Jones, here's your tooth. See these little black shadows in here? That's the decay. That's where the bacteria are digging their way into your tooth. Okay, that's not good. If we don't get to it soon, it's going to get to the nerve of your tooth and cause an infection. If that happens, guess what? Now we're looking at a root canal buildup in a crown, and that's going to cost you over $3,600 for us to fix it, plus time off of work, plus pain, and maybe anything else they told us they valued in our pre-treatment analysis, okay, our pre-treatment plan analysis. And I'll say, but the good news is we're not there yet. If we can get to it soon, we're only looking at a crown, and that's only $1,200. And I tell you what, it's not even $1,200. After your insurance pays, it's only $800, and we'll do $400 today and $400 next time. Does that work for you? And you let them answer the question. And when you present it that way, and when there's ethical consequences, and anchor them to a fee, and then make the number, every number you talk about, less and less and less in contrast after that, that alone is going to set the stage for more people to say yes.
Oh, I see what you did there. So not only did you start with the worst case scenario, what could happen if left untreated, you also mentioned the fee as to stair step down from that.
Exactly. And that's what I call my take them down the price stairs guide to better case acceptance. It's a small piece of the overall puzzle, but it is probably one of the most powerful pieces.
As you've probably noticed from the length of this season, acquiring a practice can be stressful. One of the biggest concerns facing new owners is what technology will they need in the practice to be successful? What will the new office look like to patients? Is it time for an upgrade? Should I keep the old chairs, the developing rooms, or the worn-out carpet in the hallways? Whether you need to upgrade the equipment or totally redesign your office, Dental Planet is here to help. Dental Planet provides affordable, comprehensive services that simplify your expansion or renovation process while dramatically reducing your ROI by keeping costs low. Dental Planet can reduce your equipment costs by up to 60 to 40%. They have new and certified pre-owned digital imaging systems available as well. If you need to add operatories, complete 2 operatory packages start from $36,000. With multiple financing sources available, this makes Dental Planet even more affordable. All products include a warranty backed by a nationwide network of service providers. See how easy and affordable upgrading, replacing, or expanding can be when you team up with Dental Planet. Just mention shared practices to receive an additional discount on top of their already low prices. Learn more at dentalplanet.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes. That's dentalplanet.com. Again, mention shared practices to receive an additional discount on top of their already low prices. Okay, Chris, so we have these six principles, and we've kind of talked about them. And if our listeners have listened to other podcasts, you also go through those. So let's go back to that second practice of yours that you started with that did about $35,000 a month, and you took to $120,000. What did you do with regards to the six principles to increase that revenue, fourfold?
Yeah. Well, from the reciprocity standpoint, one of the things I did was to try to get more referrals in the practice. Was that I created a referral system, and I think I shared that referral system with you. And it uses 5 of the 6 principles of influence and persuasion. And the idea was to try to inexpensively see how many more new patients I could get from an internal marketing standpoint. And it was a great way of giving them a gift and them asking them in that moment to refer someone. And they did. And so I used reciprocity to increase referrals. We started implementing the Banyan system, like I said, and getting people to like us, finding things we had in common with them. Too many times we just want to jump right in and rip their lips open and start looking at their teeth instead of stopping, taking the time to get to know them and finding some things we have in common with them. At least one thing. Okay. Then get down to the business of dentistry. So that's how we can engage the liking principle. Using consensus, like I said, finding that information on how many people are doing what they're supposed to be doing and sharing that with them. So in that practice, I was offering dental implants. And so what I did was when I have a patient who was interested in implants, we had some information. I had before and after photos available and a whole ton of them to show people, look how many people I've done this on and look how well their treatment turned out and look how happy they are, right? To kind of reduce their uncertainty about why I'm the right person to do those implant therapies for them. From an authority standpoint, I mean, we had nothing on our operatory walls. And so I realized the patients, and these patients don't know who I am. They don't know my reputation or whatever. So I had to show them my authority. It's better when we let other people, other items, other things present us as an authority versus us trying to tell people we're the authority, that we're the expert. Okay. And I think we waste too much time trying to convince the patient why we're the best dentist or the best office to do their work in, when there's other things and other items that can do it better than we can. So we're not wasting our time with it. So I just made multiple copies of my diploma and awards I'd received, an article I wrote in dentistry and got published at the time, and I put them up on the walls. Okay, so patients could look at them and stare at them before I even walked into the room. So they knew that I kind of had some training, all my CE certificates and academy affiliations I was a member of. You put all those things up on the wall so they see that you've had some training. You might have some expertise. So maybe I should listen a little more when this person tells me this is what I need. I let those things present me as the authority that I am versus me trying to tell them that I'm an authority. I would have our team credentialize me and they would brag about me to the patients and talk about all the things I had done. Again, other people can do that for you and build you up and present you as the authority you are, instead of me having to waste my time telling them I'm the authority. We got more commitments out of them, as I mentioned. When we would present a treatment plan, we would make them sign off on the treatment plan so they understood what was going to happen. And I would we would put their consequences down on paper if they did move forward with it, with an anchor fee, and make them sign off on that too, so they knew what was going to happen if they didn't move forward with treatment. Whether they realized it or not, by signing their treatment plan, they're actually making more of a commitment to actually show up and do the work, whether they realized it before they walked into the practice or not, which was kind of cool. And of course, scarcity, we use scarcity a lot. Scarcity does have some fear built into it. That's why it's a powerful motivator. But when it's ethical scarcity, meaning it's true, we're not making this stuff up, it has a lot of influence. So focusing on those consequences and what people stand to lose by not moving forward with us today was a powerful motivator to get better case acceptance across the board.
That's great. And so you think that the combination of all those things that you implemented is what led to that big bump in your production?
Oh, it was a huge factor. From the marketing side, we had to get the patients in the door, but those were all, I call them, small things make a big difference, that make a huge impact on the revenue of the practice. So, example is, I had a patient that came in, and on the surface, I didn't think I had anything in common with her, right? And so I was kind of racking my brain, like, what am I going to talk about with this person? And I was kind of hoping one of the female associates in the practice was going to be her treating dentist, because I thought, well, at least they have that in common. Hey, you're a girl, I'm a girl. you're a woman, I'm a woman, whatever. And I don't even have that. So lo and behold, it was my turn to check her, and I got her medical history form, and I'm kind of like, oh well, I guess I'll figure out something. I'll just keep asking questions until I find something we have in common. And I started looking at her medical history, and I was like, huh, look at there. And I walked in. I said, hey, I'm Dr. Phelps. Nice to meet you. And I said, let me ask you something. Were you born October 14th, 1976? And she said, yeah, actually I was. And I was like, oh, so was I. I'm your birthday buddy. And we literally had the exact same birthday, same year, everything. And we spent the next 20 minutes talking about our birthdays. I mean, she lit up like a Christmas tree, right? And we had a great conversation, and we bonded over that. And, we talked about being born in October and, who was born first. And apparently I'm like 3 hours older than she is, which she enjoyed. And we talked about being a Libra, whatever that means. But guess what? So really invoking that liking principle, right? Finding commonalities with people. And guess who left the practice that day scheduled for her $12,000 treatment plan?
Your birthday buddy.
My birthday buddy, right? Was that the only reason that she scheduled that treatment? Probably not. But don't you think it had a big reason why? It was a big influence on her to get it done, though?
Absolutely. I definitely would think that connection you made would have a big impact on her ability to trust you in terms of the case presentation.
Exactly.
So you're saying
so
it's more of
add those things up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's more of a conglomerate, right? I mean, any of those things I mentioned, if you do them, they're going to work and you're going to see results. When you start doing them in multiple places, in multiple situations, and the sequence matters, the timing of when you use these things, if they're present, is important as well, then it can have some explosive results, as I saw in my practice. I mean, we grew $1 million a year at both practice locations 2 years in a row. And then over 600 grand in each practice the third year.
And so for any of our listeners who want to learn these principles and how to implement them, you do offer a seminar. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, I do a whole 2-day workshop training on these principles, teaching you the systems that I've created, teaching you the science behind them, what makes them tick, how do you know when they're present, and how to ethically tap into them for the betterment of you and our patients. And it's kind of a workshop format, so it's kind of designed to where you can come up with new ideas as well that I may not have thought of. I mean, every workshop, I actually get a great idea from somebody who took the workshop, who said, well, okay, well, if you did it this way and it worked this way, what if we tried it this way? Would that work? And I'm like, it's genius. It would. Okay, and then I try to share what I've learned from others like that in our little community that we have. We have a little influence community. So, you can come to Charlotte, North Carolina, actually this weekend, this Friday and Saturday. In fact, I'm actually doing a 2-day workshop. I do 3 a year in Charlotte, and then I do come out and do private workshops on request. So we have like a big one in Texas, July 20th and 21st, that I'm doing, that a dentist down there is hosting. Tampa's in August 11th and 12th, I believe. So so it just depends.
And we'll include a link in the show notes for anybody who's interested in taking that seminar. And you also have a couple other things. You mentioned call Tracker ROI. If you want to explain that to our listeners.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to when, I was spending $36,000 a month in marketing to get 60 new patients from our efforts, 30 at one of the offices I took over and 30 at the other. And so I knew my marketing wasn't working. I just couldn't figure out why. And all of the call tracking programs I had tried, because I tried them all, kind of scratched at the truth, but didn't have enough data to give me the whole truth of what I felt I needed to make a smarter decision. So I decided to develop my own platform and do my own thing. And that's kind of how Call Tracker got birthed. And so the idea is, if you figure out, is the ad bringing in enough quality and quantity of new patients who spend enough to justify the expense, or is it you're not answering your telephone and you're not converting your phone calls into appointments, or is it all the above? And so what Call Tracker is designed is, if you're spending money in advertising anywhere, I want to put tracking numbers on that and get you the data to answer the questions on both sides of those coin. If you're having a problem, where is it, what is it, and why is it happening? And then I've got some solutions to the problem, right? Once we figure out specifically for you what exactly it is, which side of the coin. And so it's just a monthly service, and we track your marketing. And like I said, my goal is all about accountability. I want to be that independent person that keeps the marketing people we're paying good money to accountable for what they're doing for you. But I also want to keep our teams accountable for what they're doing as well, because most of us don't realize, as I like to say, you don't know what you don't know. Our teams are sabotaging our efforts and don't even realize it. And most of the time, it's not even their fault. Okay, is lack of training. I mean, there's 1,000 different reasons, but so right now, my average call tracker client across the U.S. and Canada isn't answering 32 to 55% of their new patient phone calls for marketing sources.
And
So
when are those missed calls happening?
99% of them are happening while you're open during business hours.
Really?
So they're not happening like most people think on the weekends or late at night when you're not open. No, they're happening when you're open. People know when you're not open. They're not calling you when you're closed. Okay. It's when you're open. And there's so many reasons why they're not answering. Think about how many activities or duties the task has to do every day. Verifying insurance benefits. That could keep them on hold for 20 minutes. Confirming appointments for the next day. Checking people in, checking people out, making the existing patient their next appointment. And if you think about it, at any given time, you've got 4 or 5 existing patients trying to call in, and you've only got 2 phone lines, like 2 physical phones sitting at the front desk, and 2 people answer it. So in essence, there's too many things going on for that one new patient call that's trying to get through. So what happens is you don't answer it, and you don't even know you missed it. And the team doesn't even know they missed it.
And Chris, not only is the call missed, but then when the call is answered, what are you guys seeing with the conversion?
Yeah, conversion average nationwide is about 34%. So it's not good either. I mean, my stats were horrible. I mean, we did not answer 220 new patient phone calls a month. And if we did answer, we only converted 24% of those into appointments. So when I say it's brutal, I mean, it didn't get much lower than me and how I was.
And I'm big on outsourcing, and I understand that you have the Golden Goose. Would you kind of feel free to explain to our listeners what that is and how you attack those 2 issues with the Golden Goose scheduling?
Yeah, exactly. So my goal was to solve this problem for my clients. And again, I tracked every call center out there, and I really hate that call center term. That's why I created a scheduling center. I don't want someone to take my calls. I want someone to make me an appointment. And so that's what the scheduling center is about. And so through tracking, my clients are using all these different call centers out there. I got to see their data because we listen to every phone call and we pull the data from it. So I know what they're doing, and I've found that they're not solving the problem. They're not answering our new patient phone calls either, and their team converts worse than our team. So I created the scheduling center with 3 main goals in mind, 3 main tenets. And number 1 is we want to help our clients answer 100% of their potential new patient phone calls that are coming in from these ad sources. Now, I'm not talking about your existing patients. I don't care about your existing patients. And you know why? Guess what your existing patient's going to do if you don't pick up the phone?
Leave a message?
They're going to leave a message or they're going to call back. The new patient, the one you paid to get, that's who I care about. If you don't answer, they're not going to leave a message and they're not going to call you back.
So how do you guys separate those 2 calls?
Well, normally, if we're doing your tracking for you, then I can forward the tracking numbers from your advertising right to the scheduling center. So we could be first in line or second in line to grab those for you. Okay, because you got to understand that probably 100% of those, or 90% at least, are going to be new patient calls. The other way you can do it is you can change your phone system to be a what they call an IVR tree. So it could be, thanks for calling George's Dental Practice. Press 1 for an existing patient. Press 2 for a new patient. And when they press 2, you can forward all the new patient calls either to the scheduling center, or you can let it ring 3 times to your office and then forward it to the scheduling center. But either way, we try to get an answer between your office and our office 100% of your new patient calls from ad sources, okay, which is key. My second tenet was my team is going to convert those calls as good, if not better, than your team. And with our 40 clients we have right now, we booked over 1,200 appointments last month for docs all over the country and Canada. Okay, my team was better than every one of their teams.
And what is your conversion rate?
So our team averages across the board 82% right now.
Wow.
Yep, which is pretty phenomenal. And that's fee for service. That's PPO practices. There's some Medicaid ones in there. It doesn't matter what your practice style is, right? Our team can learn your office and schedule better than your team, guaranteed. And the reason I guarantee it is because the third component that I've focused on to really solve this problem is if my team doesn't schedule you an appointment, then I have a communication manager that goes over my phone training stuff with them and reviews every one of those phone calls with that scheduling agent. So they learn what they could have said better or different to change the outcome of that call. So the next time they get a call like that, they're ready for your office on how to handle it and book it. So, one of our clients, he was spending $5,000 a month in marketing. and did not answer 55% of his new patient phone calls and only converted 37.5% of the ones he talked to into appointments. So he only saw 9 new patients for his $5,000 a month efforts. Okay. So the first month we took over the phones for him at the scheduling center, we got him 32 new patients. Why? Because we were able to answer more phone calls, and my team was converting 70% of those calls into appointments. Much better than his team, double, in fact. What was crazy was because, I mean, we answered probably 99% of them, but 7 or 8 phone calls went back to the office, because if we don't grab it, it goes back to your office as a second chance, if you will, to grab it. Well, the calls that his team did answer, they converted 80% of those into appointments because they had less call volume to deal with. They had more time to focus on those patients. They did a better job dealing with them, and they made better appointments. But the result was, between his team and ours, we got him 32 instead of 9 new patients. Out of those we didn't schedule, we kept reviewing them every month and reviewing that with our team. Within 3 months, we're scheduling him 61 new patients a month instead of 9.
And that's with the same marketing dollars?
Same $5,000 a month spent.
Wow.
No change. Okay. So a big difference in his ROI now. In fact, he's gone down to maybe $3,000 a month because he doesn't have to spend as much, because he only needed like 50 new patients a month.
And then, Chris, do you have an informational pamphlet about the scheduling center for our listeners, or is that something that's more exclusive right now?
Yeah, no, you can check it out on our website, goldengoosescheduling.com. I can always email you some stuff too if you want to post it somewhere. We got some informational flyers on that, and call Tracker, trackerroi.com.
Okay.
And people always ask me, how'd you come up with that name, Golden Goose? And it kind of reminded me when I talk to dentists, and I do a lot of marketing talks out there on how to get more new patients. The number one question I get is, what's that one marketing vehicle or medium that can get me, more new patients? And what I kept hearing was, it reminded me of that old story, the goose that laid the golden egg. And what I was hearing was, what's that goose that can lay me the golden egg of more new patients? And what I wanted to tell them and show them was, if you knew what I knew, right? If you saw your data and you see that you're not answering the phone calls and you're not converting very well, you already have the goose. Every one of you could get 10 or 15 more new patients a month if you tracked your stuff and had someone who could answer the phone and schedule better. Okay. So the golden egg is right there in front of you, but we can help you see it and tap into it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the phones is such a big area of opportunity that people don't think about. And so I really appreciate guys like you who go out there and create scheduling centers to help us, get more new patients.
Yeah, you're welcome. Like I said, I don't go looking for a problem, but when I find one, I can't shake it until I really figure it out. And I figure out the answer to the problem, the solution. And it's a lot of it's out of necessity, and like I said, I had these problems too. I went through them. I needed to grow. And I thought, well, geez, if this stuff works for me, I know it'll work for others. And if I can help be shorten your learning curve, right? If you don't have to make the mistakes I made, okay, then that's how I like to help people.
And Chris, do you have any other advice for our listeners? Most of them are pre-ownership, and they're going to be looking to acquire a practice or start a practice soon. I know you've given us so much great information over the past hour, but do you have anything else to share with them?
Well, I guess the idea is, if you're coming out of practice, just know that obviously there's hope. I do a talk at my dental school every year, and I'm always surprised by the 4th-year students. I do a lecture called the top 20 things you need to do to succeed today and survive tomorrow's dental economy, and how they can. I kind of view this, the corporate storm that's coming with corporate dentistry as it keeps growing, and insurance companies are buying dental practices, and the guy who invented supercuts says he's going to invent the supercuts model of dentistry, where there's just 3 fees for everything we do in dentistry, and he's going to spread these all over the country. I see a lot of competition in a tsunami, if you will, coming, and there's really only 3 ways to survive the tsunami. And so number one is you become part of the wave, and meaning you join corporate, or if you're in practice now, you sell out to corporate while you still have some value in your practice. Or number 2, you got to find practices where you can build up your walls so high. And I mean, building up your walls, meaning you got to be open hours people aren't, right? When people can't take off of work anymore. Okay. So you got to be open hours that they can need to get in to see you, after hours and on the weekends. You got to have multiple docs in the practice. You got to add specialty procedures, either with specialists or you learning how to do them. You got to understand marketing. You got to understand the case acceptance coin. You got to do everything you can to build up your wall so high You got to go for a fee-for-service patient instead of being in the insurance game. That's where the dental savings plans and the membership savings plans come into play. But you build up your walls so high that when the wave hits, and it's going to hit, you divert the wave instead of it flooding you, right? So it doesn't hurt you for the long run. And the last thing I would tell them is, or you just be on a different continent when it hits. And so one of the things, right? That's the best way to avoid it. Don't even be around. And so one of the things I've been doing is working with retirement communities in my area and talking to them about putting mobile dental equipment on site at the retirement communities and building mini practices with 4 or 5 chairs, and then having my dentist, my associate docs rotate around. So if I get a community that can support us 5 days a week, I'll have somebody there 5 days a week. If they can only support us 1 day a week, I'll be there 1 day a week, and I'll be at a different community the next day. But the idea is you can build mini practices that can produce in one chair the same as they can produce in my practice, but with a fraction of the startup cost and the overhead, right? So being on a different continent means thinking outside of the box a little bit, changing up the traditional dental model. And I think we can do that, and be just as profitable as a result. And so just when I give that lecture to the dental school students, I'm always surprised that there's hope there, because they keep telling me all they're hearing is they have to go corporate. And I'm saying, no, you don't. Okay, you can do this. You can survive on your own. You can survive in a group, or you can totally think outside of the box and do something completely different. So that would be my best advice. Don't feel like that you're trapped and you have to do it a certain way. There's always another option.
Yeah, I think with how many things you've done, that's definitely great advice for our listeners, and I really do appreciate you coming on, Dr. Phelps. You're doing so much, and you took the time to talk with us, and I think our listeners got a lot out of your episode. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, George. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.
Okay, so I should have had a tally and counted the number of times that you actually got to slip in some helpful, useful comments. But that was a ton of really good information. So for you, what was your biggest takeaways from this?
Well, before I get into that, I think if you count the intro, this is my second time talking the episode.
Nice.
So, no, I think sometimes you go into an interview with a preconceived idea of, what you want that guest to relay. And
sure.
I think this was one of those interviews where I had that. And, I think if you go back and listen to it after hearing me explain this, you might see it where I was kind of asking Chris a question, thinking that I knew what he was going to say. And so I really wanted him to explain what was the 1 or 2 things, because I think with an acquisition, you have to focus on some of the big things first. You can't do a lot of things at once. And so I was trying to get him to maybe prioritize of all the things that he mentions, what are some of the more important things.
Right.
And he really didn't budge on explaining that they're all very important. And I think that was it's a concept that I think is maybe it's good to talk about this season, because we talk so much about prioritizing certain things that, there really is a synergistic effect to everything.
Where, I feel like
go ahead.
Justin Short, sorry to T-bone you there. I feel like Justin Short also kind of dug his heels into that, where he was like, no, it's not just this one thing or the other thing. It's no, you kind of have to do it all together, and it has to be all good and all right. Otherwise, in isolation, any of these principles isn't going to take you to the next level.
Yeah, and I think Chris he was like, nope, it's everything. You really got to do it all to get the full effect. And it reminds me of the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, one of my favorite books. And he talks about the flywheel, where it's like this that same concept where you just do a lot of little things and it adds up to one huge thing. And I think if there's one thing to take away from this episode, it'd be that concept, that doing a lot of little things right leads to big results.
Awesome. Perfect.
All right. And we'll see you next time on the Sheriff Practices podcast.
Yes. Talk to you next time.